Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really focusing in, stripping away the noise to look closely at just one source. It's a very detailed personal account of a near-death experience, an NDE, that happened after a heroin overdose back in 2018.
Yeah, and this account from someone we're calling Stephen M., it's fascinating because it really challenges a lot of the typical NDE patterns we often discuss.
Exactly. It's not just a story. It's packed with these specific details that, frankly, defy many common expectations about what happens, when someone crosses that threshold.
That's right, because when we usually look at NDE research, you see these recurring themes, right?
Yeah.
Feelings of peace, seeing a bright light, the sense of unity.
Huh.
Stephen M.'s experience, it kind of flips that. It replaces that expected bliss with, well, paradoxes and eventually this profound sense of knowing something new. And the context here is crucial. This wasn't just like feeling faint, the source is clear. It was clinical death. Yes, cessation of breathing, maybe heart function too. He apparently turned blue. So we're talking about a complete physiological shutdown, not just a close call.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack this specific account. We want to go through it chronologically, look at what he actually saw, what he felt, and crucially, understand why an experience that sounds pretty terrifying, honestly defined by confusion and fear, still gave him this absolute conviction of an afterlife.
And led to a complete overhaul of his spiritual beliefs. It's quite the journey.
It really is. So let's dive in, starting right at that moment his consciousness, well, shifted.
Okay, so the transition itself is pretty remarkable. The way he describes it is immediate, almost jarringly physical in its out-of-body nature. He says he woke up, not in his body, but hovering.
Yeah, hovering 20 feet above himself. That specific height, 20 feet, it feels so measured, not just vaguely floating. Right?
Exactly. It gives the sense of a distinct vantage point, high above the car he was in.
And from there, he's watching this incredibly dramatic scene unfold below, his own potential demise and rescue.
He gives that vivid detail, doesn't he? Watching the girl who was with him in the car.
Right, straddling me and pounding on my face and chest, trying to revive him.
And he's just observing this, weightless, for what felt like, he said, a few minutes.
So when we talk about an out-of-body experience, an OBE, is that core sensation, that feeling of being separate, what he describes. He explicitly says, I clearly left my body and existed outside it. Does that fit the standard definition?
Oh, absolutely. That sensation of spatial separation, of observing your physical body and surroundings from a point outside it. That's the classic definition of an OBE. Stephen M.'s description is spot on in that regard.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, isn't it? The consciousness aspect?
Yes, here's the major deviation. Usually reports of OBEs, especially within NDEs, talk about heightened awareness, hyper-alertness, consciousness feeling clearer or faster than normal.
But he said the opposite.
Exactly. He states his consciousness felt distorted, slowed down, way down. Less than normal waking consciousness, not more. That's unusual.
So how does that square with him observing the scene so clearly below? If his mind felt slowed down, how could he process those vivid details?
Yeah.
That seems like a real paradox.
It is a paradox. It suggests maybe some kind of highly selective perceptual filter was active. I mean, think about his senses.
Right.
Hearing. He said he couldn't hear anything. It was just gone. But his vision.
His vision was intense, right? He described it as looking through a tunnel, vortex at this situation.
Yes. And overall, he felt his senses, despite the lack of hearing and the slowed cognition, were somehow more vivid than usual.
So no sound, slow thinking, but super vivid tunnel vision focused on the scene below.
Right. Now, some neurological explanations for tunnel vision point to oxygen starvation affecting peripheral sight. But his clear, detailed observation of the complex scene within that tunnel, well, that makes a simple hypoxia explanation feel a bit incomplete, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like more than just the brain shutting down. It's like the tunnel was intentional, an aperture focusing his awareness.
Perhaps. It raises questions about the nature of perception in that state. Slowed down cognitively, yet hyper-focused visually. It's a very specific, very strange combination. Okay, so we have this physical paradox established, impossible vantage point, slowed mind, yet vivid, filtered senses. But then we get to the emotional content. And this is where his experience just completely breaks from the NDE rulebook, as you might call it.
Absolutely. This is highly significant. When you read NDE accounts or hear about them, what's the dominant feeling reported?
Usually peace, right? Unconditional love, maybe a sense of oneness, cosmic unity, that kind of thing.
Precisely. Bliss, essentially. Stephen M. reports the exact opposite emotional landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, he listed them. Sad, crying, lost, tired, forgetful.
Uh-huh.
and scared, intensely scared. No peace, no joy, no unity, just this constellation of negative, distressing emotions.
Why is that distinction so important, do you think? I mean, if an NDE is just, say, a brain event, like some final chemical release to ease death, wouldn't it logically be comforting, or at least neutral? Why fear and sadness? Well, that's the challenge this account poses, isn't it? It really pushes back against the idea that these experiences are purely some kind of psychological comfort mechanism or a natural anesthetic produced by the dying brain.
Because why would the brain cook up dread?
Exactly. If it's just wish fulfillment or a coping strategy, why generate pure existential dread and fear? His experience suggests he was encountering something genuinely unknown, perhaps something inherently frightening or confusing, not just a projection of comfort.
And he did mention the tunnel again in this context. He said he passed into or through it, ended up on the other side, but he couldn't actually remember the process of going through.
Right, the passage itself is a blank, but he knew he was through it, and on the other side was darkness.
Yeah, he explicitly contrasted it with his beliefs. He came from a Catholic background, always assumed there'd be a heaven, the expected blissful afterlife.
Yeah.
But this, he described it as if I was going into a black void.
And that void, that's really the philosophical heart of this part of his experience, I think, this profound absence.
Absence of everything you'd expect, pretty much.
Yeah.
Absence of brilliant light, absence of comforting colors, absence of any guiding presence. He's very clear. No deceased relatives waiting for him, no religious figures. He specifically mentions no Jesus, no Buddha, and no mystical voice or entity offering guidance. Just nothingness, a void.
A black, seemingly empty void. And coupled with those feelings of fear and being lost, well, for someone expecting pearly gates, that's a shocking contrast.
It's incredibly confronting. But here's the kicker, right? Despite encountering this terrifying void that completely contradicted his religious upbringing, he still came away convinced the afterlife is real.
That's the crux of it. That disconnect is what makes this account so powerful as evidence for transformative personal experience. The proof of existence for him survived the complete failure of his expectation of what that existence would feel like. Comfort wasn't required for certainty.
Wow. Yeah, the terrifying black void leading to absolute conviction. That's a profound finding. Okay, so he's in this void, feeling lost and scared. But obviously, he came back. The journey didn't end there.
No, it didn't. And the return, much like the departure, wasn't gentle. It was abrupt, dramatic.
Triggered by external intervention, he said. The girl in the car essentially pulled him back.
Yes. He doesn't describe a peaceful floating back into his body. Instead, it's a sudden, jarring waking, and not even in the truck anymore.
No. He woke up outside the truck, face down in a pile of snow.
Imagine that transition. From a non-physical void to suddenly being slammed back into physical reality, face down in freezing snow. He actually mentioned that the shock, the sudden cold and pain, that moment of waking in the snow, was one of only 2 moments of the highest, clearest consciousness he remembers from the whole thing.
That's ironic, isn't it? The return to painful reality was clearer than the out-of-body part.
It grounds the experience in a way. Reminds us this started with a physical crisis and ended with a physical reality, mediated by another person's actions.
It's easy to get lost in the metaphysics, the void and the floating. But you're right, it loops back to that young woman performing CPR, pulling him out of the truck, literally saving his life. And despite the fear, the confusion, the void, he comes back with this unshakable knowledge, his words. I just know now there's an afterlife, period. And that knowledge wasn't just a comfort. It fundamentally rewired his whole spiritual framework.
Completely. He essentially abandoned his Catholic roots, the structure he grew up with, and he replaced it with this different understanding of divinity. Yeah, that phrase he used, vibration, frequency, and light are my God now. What do you make of that language?
It's very modern, almost new agey or scientifically inflected.
It is. It seems like an attempt to conceptualize the afterlife, or God, or ultimate reality, in terms that aren't based on human-like figures or traditional narratives. Vibration, frequency, light, it points towards physics, towards energy.
Like the fundamental nature of existence is energetic, not personal.
Perhaps. It suggests that the state beyond the physical body isn't populated by beings in the way we think of them, but is maybe more like a field of pure energy, governed by principles like frequency and vibration. It's his way of trying to put language to the indescribable, perhaps even to that void he experienced. Maybe the void wasn't empty, but just empty of things he could recognize.
Interesting. So a shift from a personal God to an impersonal energetic principle.
Seems like it. A move away from traditional religion towards a kind of modern pan-spiritualism grounded in his NDE. And another really important point he made, crucial for understanding the aftermath. The NDE itself wasn't some magic bullet for his addiction issues.
Right.
He's very clear about that. The experience didn't instantly make him sober or fix his life in that sense.
But
But the knowledge he gained from it, that bedrock certainty that there is an afterlife, that death isn't the end, that knowledge helps him now, it provides ongoing support in his recovery.
how do you think that works? If the scary experience didn't force sobriety, how does the certainty help?
Well, think about it psychologically. If, based on personal experience that feels utterly real, that physical death is an annihilation, it fundamentally changes your perspective on earthly struggles, doesn't it?
It removes the ultimate fear, maybe.
Exactly. The fear of non-existence, of oblivion. If that's off the table, maybe the immediate pressures and anxieties of life, including addiction, feel different, less absolute. It could free up mental and emotional resources to focus on recovery, knowing that the stakes, while high, aren't ultimate in the same way. The trauma didn't cure him, but the certainty gave him a new foundation.
That makes sense. Okay, let's move into the really unique lasting impacts. Because this is where Stevenham's account goes into territory that, frankly, sounds pretty astonishing. He reports developing new abilities. Yes, this is quite remarkable. He states he is now fairly successful, his words, at two things: remote viewing and inducing out-of-body experiences himself. Okay, let's break that down for listeners. Remote viewing, that's the alleged ability to perceive information about distant places or hidden things, right?
Right.
Without using normal senses.
Correct. It's controversial, of course, but that's the claim. And the second part, inducing OBEs. That means he believes he can now willfully enter a state similar to the one he was thrown into during the overdose.
He can reproduce parts of the experience on demand.
That's what he suggests. He can achieve that state of separation, that out-of-body perspective, through his own efforts now.
Wow. Is that common for NDE survivors to gain abilities like that? Like psychic powers or controllable OBEs?
Well, profound life changes, perspective shifts, increased empathy, reduced fear of death, those are very common, almost universal after significant NDEs. But the acquisition of specific, demonstrable, and reproducible psychophysical abilities like controlled OBEs or successful remote viewing, that's considered extremely rare in the NDE literature.
So what could explain it in his case?
It raises fascinating possibilities. One theory might be that the extreme trauma of the event somehow, neurologically, unlocked latent abilities that were always there. Another possibility is that the experience imprinted the process of separation so vividly in his memory that he essentially learned the how-to and can now follow that mental blueprint. We don't know, obviously, but it's a rare outcome.
And there's also the way he remembers the NDE itself. He said it took months, maybe even years, for the memory to fully surface and integrate.
Yes, the integration process was slow, which suggests the brain really struggled to file this experience, right? It was so far outside normal categories.
But once it did integrate, he says it feels definitely real. And interestingly, he feels he remembers the NDE more accurately than other ordinary life events from around that same time.
That's also a common feature reported by NDers. The memory feels hyper-real, more real than real, and it doesn't fade like ordinary memories. It gets etched in, carrying this profound sense of significance.
And he's still wrestling with it, isn't he? He called it a very important matter and said he wants to figure out the mechanics.
Yeah, he mentioned wanting to know how I got up 20 feet and how I got back down. He even talked about maybe trying hypnosis to access more details. He's still pursuing the physical mystery alongside the spiritual certainty.
It really is like a detective story playing out in his own life and consciousness.
Yeah.
But amidst all this high strangeness, the void, the floating, the new abilities, when he reflected on the single most significant part of the whole ordeal, what did he point to?
It wasn't the metaphysics, it wasn't the void or the OBE state or even the certainty of afterlife.
It was being saved by that girl.
Exactly, the human connection,
Yeah.
the immediate physical act of intervention by another person in the moment of crisis. That, for him, trumped everything else.
That's incredibly grounding, isn't it? It brings it all back to life, connection, human action.
It's the ultimate synthesis, perhaps. The most profound takeaway wasn't about the nature of death or the afterlife, but about the value of the life he was returned to, thanks to someone else's actions.
Okay, so let's try and recap the key features of this really unique NDE for you. We had clinical death, leading to an out-of-body state. But unlike many accounts, this state was marked by confusion, deep sadness, and fear. A real subversion of the usual peace narrative.
Right. Then there was the encounter with what he described as a black void. No light, no beings, no expected heavenly scenes, just darkness and fear.
Yet despite that terror, it led to absolute certainty of an afterlife and a total shift in his spiritual views away from Catholicism towards vibration, frequency, and light as his concept of God. And finally, the development of these lasting, quite extraordinary abilities, repeatable OBEs, and apparent success with remote viewing. Plus that persistent, hyper-real memory of the event. So thinking about the bigger picture here, what does an account like this challenge us to consider?
Well, it really makes you question the assumption that NDEs have to be blissful or positive to be considered valid or meaningful, doesn't it? Here we have an experience that was, by his own account, frightening. It lacked all the typical comforting elements. It involved a black void.
Yeah. And still, it was powerful enough to completely convince him of an afterlife's reality. It provided a certainty that actually helps fuel his ongoing recovery. So the provocative thought for you, listening, might be this.
Okay. If certainty about existence beyond death can be forged in an experience of fear and darkness, what does that imply about the nature of personal evidence versus, say, established religious frameworks? And maybe, just maybe, what does it suggest about the reliability or perhaps the interpretation of the tranquility and bliss reported in other NDEs? Does horror provide a different kind of truth?
It suggests the landscape beyond our physical life might be far more complex, maybe even more challenging, than our neat cultural or religious stories prepare us for. That personal knowledge, even when terrifying, can rewrite everything. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Stephen Hempton's really singular, challenging account. We hope it gives you something to think about regarding how personalized knowledge, even when it contradicts expectations, can profoundly shape reality.
Thank you for listening to Borrowed Time NDE Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss a moment of inspiration. Until next time, wishing you an extraordinary and truly wonderful time on your journey through life.